I realized that the way I showed how to do this using Excel stat, I did that way because I think it's easier to kind of click through the buttons, and you don't have to think too much about how it's working. But the calculations that we're doing are all very standard. So to calculate a z value or a t value, and so we can just calculate them directly. In order to do that, what we need is the mean, the standard deviation, and the count. Those are kind of the elements that we'll use to do a test. Right? So let's start by just doing a comparison of did men or women lose more weight? Okay, so our hypothesis is that men and women lose the same amount of weight, and we're going to do a test to see if that's true or not. To do that, I'm not looking at initial weight and ending weight. I'm looking at the delta. So this is weight loss. So my column of weight loss. And I'm going to compare men versus women. To get the values that I need, I'm going to go Insert, Pivot Table. Pivot Table is a feature in Excel that allows me to manipulate my data and create a new table. It's a very simple way to simplify this. It looks very complicated when you start, but it's not all that bad. I'm going to take gender and put it in my row, so I have rows of women and men. And then I'm going to take delta, which is my weight loss, put it as a value. I'm going to do this 3 times. It defaults always to the sum, but I don't want the sum, so I'll hit the little I and change this to average. All right, so that column is showing average. I'll change the second one to standard deviation, and my third one I will change to count. Okay, so now I see that women on average lost about 13 pounds, men on average lost 21 pounds, standard deviation of each group, and the count of each group. So in order to get a z value from this, my formula is going to be group 1 minus group 2 divided by the square root of sigma squared over n plus sigma squared over n. A little complex. It's this formula here. This is what's in our notes. Right? So mean 1 minus mean 2 divided by the square root of sigma 1 squared, that's the variance of group 1, n1, sigma squared, sigma 2 squared, that's the variance of 2. So I'm just going to do these in parts. The point difference is the difference between the means. So that is 12 minus 21. Okay. I'm going to calculate my sigma 1 squared over n first. So that's my standard error. Let's do standard error 1 is equal to standard deviation little caret 2 to square that, and then all divided by the count, and the same thing, standard error 2 is equal to this squared divided by n. Right, now I'm going to add those together. Standard error total equals this plus, nope, I had the wrong one there. Okay. So now I've added these two things together. Now I'm going to get my, let's say, denominator. So that's everything under this line is equal to the square root SQRT of those values. Great. Now I need to divide my point difference by this value. So my Z score is equal to this divided by this is equal to 11.6. Okay. We do the same thing using the Z, or using the Excel stat here. And you see we get 11.6. It's the exact same values. Right? So there's no magic in using Excel stat. It's just a little bit simpler, maybe. But we can calculate the same thing directly using a pivot table. That's the easiest way to do it with the pivot table. All right, so that's saying, is there a difference between the weight loss between men and women? Yes. The average weight loss between men is not the same as the average weight loss with women. In the people on the show, The Biggest Loser. Okay. Now let's answer a different question. Do people actually lose weight on this show? So, is there a difference between your initial and your starting weight? Hypothesis is that initial and ending weight are the same. So we're going to test that. Hypothesis is that the difference is 0. I will go insert pivot table. So I've got a new pivot table. And here I'm going to be looking at just some of the values. So I need my delta. I'll put it in here 3 times. I'll change this one to average. This one to standard deviation. And this one to count. So the formula for a paired t-test is my average minus the hypothesized difference, which is 0. Right? So my numerator, the top part of the equation is it's here. Just copied these so you have a little reference here. So it's going to be equal to this, that's x bar, minus our mu is 0. Okay, and our denominator is s divided by the square root of n, so that's standard deviation divided by square root of n. Okay, and so my t score is this divided by this, just 39.8. Right, that's our t value here. Okay, and if I look here at Excel stat, doing the exact same test, right? Comparing weight, is there a difference between weight 1 and 2? The t value here is 39.8, and the t value that we calculated is 39.8. They're the same. So we can calculate these things directly. It's just a little tricky sometimes figuring out how to get these values, but that's what the pivot table can help us with. Let's do one more. whether or not Jillian Michaels makes a difference. So I've made a column. It is 1 if your trainer was Jillian, 0 otherwise. I want to see if the weight loss is different between people who had Jillian and people who did not. I will go to Insert, Pivot Table. This is asking me how much of the data to include all of the data. All right. So I want my rows to be Jillian or not. Do you have Jillian or do you not have Jillian? And again, I'll bring in my delta 3 times. Change this to average. Standard deviation. Count. Okay, so now I'm doing a z-test to compare these two means. Just pulling over the formula so we have it here for easy reference. So the point difference between means is not having Jillian minus having Jillian. Let's do this one here. Let's just do these in slow parts. So let's do sigma 1 squared in 1 sigma 2 squared in 2. Just so we have all these values very clearly with us. Sigma 1 is this. So I will do equals this value. It's shift 6 for the little caret 2. That squares it. My n1 is this. Okay. Sigma 2 is this value, caret 2, and my n2 is equal to this. Great. Now we can add them together, so I'll do just S. Standard error 1 is equal to sigma 1 squared divided by n. My standard error 2 is equal to sigma 2 squared divided by n2. Right. Now I'm going to do the sum. I'm just adding these two things together. Equals this plus this. Right? Good. Now I need to get the whole denominator. Right, this is everything under the line. So that is equal to the square root, SQRT, of the sum. Okay. Finally, I can get my z. Z is equal to my point difference divided by my denominator, and I get negative 1.6. That value is less than a critical value of 1.96, right? So there is not evidence to conclude that having Jillian Michaels is any different than having another instructor on your weight loss. Right? We're just calculating this directly. In another video, I showed the same process. Let's see. Yeah, it's here using Excel stat, and you can see the z value that it calculated, negative 1.6. Okay, it's exactly what we calculated. Right, so it's the same thing. You can get to it without using Excel stat. You just use pivot tables instead to get the data you need.